Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas on Friday, September 29th, and welcome to our video commentary. I want to talk about Cuba today. Two very interesting stories having to do with Cuba. The first one is that the U.S. Embassy will be reduced. The State Department is calling back much of the staff, leaving basically essential personnel. Much of the work at that embassy will be reduced to very little. Now, this is, of course, in response to these electronic attacks on Cuban diplomats over the last few weeks. We still don't know who did it, but the fact that it targeted U.S. diplomats in Cuba, I think it's only cautious on the part of the State Department to say, hey, we're going to pull back our staff until we figure out what happened in Cuba. But that was expected, as I said. I was expecting the State Department to do that. The second move, though, I think will have larger consequence in Cuba. The State Department is also issuing a travel warning to Americans in Cuba. The logic is that many of the U.S. diplomats who were attacked in these or targeted by the electronic attacks, some of them were actually at hotels when this happened. So since we don't know who did it, but we do know they're targeting Americans, they could be targeting American tourists as well. So I think the State Department, in simply telling Americans, hey, be careful, because this could be a very dangerous area. And this is, I think, going to have an impact of Cuba, particularly if American tourists cut back in any of the travel to the island. Over the last couple of years, about $1 billion to $1.5 billion in tourism have gone into Cuba since President Obama reopened the embassy and made it easier for Americans to travel to Cuba. The net impact of this is that these $1 to $2 billion annually has actually offset some of the money that was coming from Venezuela. Cuba used to get a very large subsidy from Venezuela. Of course, Venezuela now is in no position to help Cuba. So the fact that if Cuba loses its tourism money that was coming to the United States, on top of the fact that Venezuela is not subsidizing anymore, I think it's going to have a huge impact on the Cuban economy at a time when they also need to spend some money rebuilding some of these resorts in the north of Cuba. So I think it's going to be a very difficult time for the Cuban government over the next year or so. It may very well create the kind of economic situation in Cuba that could see a Cuban government be willing to negotiate with the United States and be willing to maybe open up Cuba a little bit and accept some of the requirements that, for example, the embargo imposes on Cuba and all of that. So we're going to keep an eye on the situation in Cuba, because I think all of these things could have a huge impact on what happens in Cuba. On top of all of this, Raul Castro has already announced that he's going to retire next year. So you can have a lot of things going on right now that could very well see some changes in Cuba over the next couple of years. Thank you for watching. Thank you for watching. All of these commentaries are archived over at YouTube, as well as our blog, as well as over on Twitter. So thank you very much for watching. Thank you for your time. Have a great weekend, everybody. Bye-bye.